Do you hate having to overpay for good paintbrushes? Having your brushes split, fray, and become almost useless immediately? Spending your hard-earned money on brush cleaners that just don't work? Wasting valuable drawer space in your home? Have no fear, finger painting is here. Johnny Glaze here to tell you all about the revolutionary miniature painting style that will change your life
for the better.
It base coats, it layers, it wet blends, it glazes. So call the number on your screen now and get my 3-part series where I impart all of my miniature painting wisdom for only 4 easy payments of $19.95. Hey again, friends, and in all seriousness.
And if this channel is known for one thing, it's for how bloody serious it is.
We are going to actually finger paint a model today. A while back, I heard that the amazingly renowned miniature painter Roman Lapot painted this amazing bust by starting with finger painting. And instead of actually doing my own research and figuring out the why and the how that he did it, I'm way too lazy to read, I decided that you and I today can go through the process together and try to discover what, if anything, helps by finger painting your model. I think this Umber Hulk miniature will be a great canvas for this experiment. It's got a lot of large surfaces and texture on its carapace that will help us through this experimentation. Before we start slinging paint all over this model, let's build up its base quick. I like to use real slate when building up my model base because it's a rock that looks like a real rock because it is a real rock. And I've got a tip on how to get this stuff cheap. Just head over to your local hardware store and buy a bathroom or kitchen floor tile made of pure slate and take it home and smash it up with a hammer. Then you will have as much basing slate rock that you will ever need. I want this Umber Hulk to appear as if it just smashed into the ground and some shards of rock are coming up. So I start building my slate that way. And then I can fill in the gaps around the rock as well as build in a real earth texture with this Vallejo texture paste. And then for my final step, I will just sprinkle a lot of real dirt around to create some irregularities in that ground texture. I base coat the entire model a rich mahogany by Pro Acryl and blue-black on the base by the same brand. I then go through with white ink and create a zenithal, and in hindsight, this was the wrong step to take. You see, it does get some of that white ink in spots that are slightly in the recesses. When we get in there with our finger paints, we can't exactly be exact, and we're gonna have to fight some of that white ink later. We made it through, but I wouldn't do this if I did it over. Now, a step that I am happy that I took was to put out all of the colors that I was going to use on my palette before I began. I never used any additional colors than these. I just made sure that they were pure, strong tones for each color that I used because I was going to do mixing with my fingers right on the palette and go right from model to palette and never have to open another bottle of paint. Now, let me answer the question before you even ask it. This sweet Umber Hulk comes from Broken Anvil Miniatures and their brand new Kickstarter, Dungeon Delvers. I'm a fan of minis with a unique, interesting, artistic style, especially ones that can be used for my D&D games, proxies for other mini games I play, and models that just get me excited to paint. Dungeon Delvers even offers these awesome 32mm models 2 different ways. Either incredibly high quality resin models that will be shipped right to your door, or STL files that you can print from home to your heart's content. Along with the creative new takes on classic creatures and monsters, the Kickstarter has a lot of super sweet stretch goals in store as well, like a wood dragon, and even a swamp troll with his own bridge that he can live under, and way more unlocks. A big thank you to Broken Anvil Miniatures for sending me over this awesome Umber Hulk to paint and for supporting the channel. Okay, back to the video. Now it's time to get our hands dirty. And while I do this, I'm going to try to turn my brain off a bit. I don't want to overthink things here. I just want to experience and absorb what's going on and learn from it. Umber Hulks in Dungeons and Dragons are traditionally all brown. And I want this model to end up feeling brown, but I'm kind of having a lot of fun just messing with a bunch of colors right here. And we'll see if I can make it still feel brown in the end. I don't know about that. It is really kind of easy to say, hey, that thing's brown, I should paint it brown. In miniature painting, we kind of tend to do that. I'm guilty of it as much as the next guy. But in reality, there's a lot more depth and nuance that makes up any material we see in the real world. The light, the reflections, the fibers that it was made of, and the intricacies of color there. And so maybe this thing can still look brown, but feel more rich. You know, I just stated that I had a lot of fun doing this. And the more I think about it, fun isn't exactly the right word. I think it's more of an experience of joy. I'm really having a lot of joy while doing this. And what I mean by that is, I have a lot of joy that I don't have to worry about having all the answers on how to do this. I'm having a lot of joy because I don't have to worry about being exact or having perfect brush control. And weirdly enough, I'm experiencing a lot of joy just creating a physical connection with the model, with my physical touch. In addition to creating interest with color, I want to start creating more interest with volumes and shapes and light. How would each portion of the model capture more light in a real-world setting? And where would it land? And again, because I can't be very exact with my fingers, I really almost kind of squint my eyes and unfocus them and really see just the shapes. Where would it touch? And go from there. And now to kind of bring all of these colors back together and kind of marry them into that world of brown, I decide to make my own mix of contrast paint and contrast medium. I go with a 50-50 mix and I put it over the entire model. Now in hindsight, I should have thinned it down even more. I would have gone with a little bit more of a 4-to-1 mix or a 3-to-1 mix medium to paint, because I feel like I lost a little bit too much overall color interest that I created earlier. And I will end up building that back with layering after this, but I think I kind of made more work for myself than I needed to. But the good thing is I can still gain a sense of those colors underneath, even though the whole model now feels brown. I can see those greens and pinks and oranges and purples, and they're still there, and they've created a depth for us that otherwise we wouldn't have. I don't know about you all, but something about me really hates to waste paint once I've gotten it on my palette. I know I just can't put it back in the bottle later. So I take that mix of contrast that I use all over the model and I add a couple drops of Payne's Gray ink to it. This creates a muddy, dark, bluish, brownish, blackish tone, and I put that all over the base, and that will shade everything down there as well. And speaking of using paints that are already on the palette, I just grab my messy wet palette I use for finger painting and I take my brush to it. I'm going to pull out my highlight colors, my light pinks and oranges and yellows and browns and greens, and I'm going to use those colors that are already there and build up my highlights again. I I choose to highlight each section based on what color I can sense underneath that brown contrast coat. If it's greens, I take a light green and highlight back up to reestablish that color as, yes, it still feels brown, but I want to show these other color interests as well. You can spend as much time or as little time on this step as you like. You could add more levels of layering even before your highlight steps if you'd like. I basically just went with what was fun for me, and when it got monotonous, I stopped. But the cool thing is, I could continue this up with many more hours and really take this to a display level model. That's pretty cool for starting with finger painting. This model has these amazing little beady eyes down by tiny little mandibles that are kind of tucked under this awesome rhino beetle horn. And I want to make sure that they pop and they really scream out to the audience. So I start by painting them a bright white. I then take Tamiya Clear Red, which is a transparent paint that is very glossy and very bright. And with a couple of coats of this eye looks like it is beaming, and it really stands out against all the dark and interesting colors around it. I'm really liking where the model is, but I've got a couple more quick steps I want to take care of on the base. The first being an all-over brown wash to kind of dull it down a little bit. And then to enhance the feel of this being a natural environment and give us a little bit of color variation, I dab on some pigment powders right on that base to really make it feel like a lively environment. As I glance over at my wet palette upon finishing this project, I think I get it. I get why finger painting has a place in this hobby. And it's not just this specific technique. It's almost a mindset that you're required to step into in order to attempt this. It's about breaking free of all the stress and the worry and the information that we have to hold so dear in our heart in order to try to paint a model. It's about just letting go and focusing on those things that matter most: color and light and interest, things that draw the eye to something that looks beautiful or interesting. I really enjoyed painting this model. This was a really fun project, and I hope that it showed in the video. If you like what I do and want to support the channel, there's a few ways you can do so. First, you can check out the affiliate links in the video description where you can purchase products for the hobby with no additional cost to you, and I get a slight kickback. Next, you can check out my shirts over at ninjon.net. And finally, you can think about becoming a patron. If you join the dojo, you'll have access to all sorts of fun rewards and get to hang out with me on Discord. I appreciate all of you. We'll see you next time. Roman Lapat, you're a friggin' genius, man.